think that there is a gender pay gap? And if so, why is it happening? Or what is the cause of that? Is it capitalism? Are we all doomed?
So I think that there is a gender pay gap, and neither the left nor the right is doing a very good job of explaining what it is or why it happens. Because on the left, you have this idea that it's just out and right sexism. People are saying, I'm going to pay women less. And I'm sure that there are people who say that, but that is mostly not what is happening. And on the right, you have, well, it's just a matter of choices. This is not an issue that we should be concerned with. Again, that gets back to totally seeding the issue. And, that just doesn't work. You're not addressing what's actually happening. And what actually happens with the gender pay gap is if you look at young, unmarried women without children who live in major cities, oftentimes the gender pay gap reverses. In other words, those women make more than their male peers. But once they get married, once they have children, and if they move away from urban areas, but really those first two things, all of a sudden, their male peers start pulling far ahead. And that's where you get to the question of people saying, oh, this is just a matter of choice, because they are choosing to get married, they're choosing to have children. And so if they chose not to do those things, then they wouldn't be facing this pay gap. But first off, men are also choosing to get married and choosing to have children, and it's not impacting them in the same way. And then secondly, why is that happening? Well, in part, it's because of many cultural views around who should end up taking over, who should be doing more of the child care. When a child is sick, who's going to take off work? And which might be happening within a specific couple, and we see that it does. I'm a millennial, and millennial men increasingly do participate in more of childcare and more of domestic labor than any previous generations, but it's still less than their female peers. And even in couples where you have their female partners rather, and even in couples where it's a dual income couple, both couples are making the same income, you still see women overwhelmingly doing more of the childcare and more of the labor at home, the other home labor. And what's really interesting is the more that women make more than their husbands, the more likely they are to do an increased share of both childcare and other domestic labor, and that impacts them, right? But that's happening within the couple. Let me be clear, I do not think that the government should be doing anything to change that. That's about societal roles. I think that those things are changing. That happens in conversations. That is happening through the marketplace of ideas. That's why we're already seeing more equality happening along those lines. But those attitudes, even when they're not within the couple, when they're outside of the couple, it becomes expected in that way. You start getting, women might get mommy tracked or things like that. That's because of expectations of what they might be doing and who's going to be working harder. Men who get married, oftentimes are viewed as more stable, more likely to work hard. And so they're more likely to get those. And again, these are societal conditions, but there are also policies that impact all of this. It might be the tax code, which punishes essentially dual income families and really is set up on purpose in order to incentivize one person to work outside the home and one person to stay home with kids. It might be childcare policies that make it very difficult to get flexible childcare. And a lot of the fixes, the so-called fixes that we're seeing coming, oftentimes from the left now, completely overlook what women say they want, which is more flexibility, more ability to tailor their days towards the fact that they want to be taking care of their families, and they also want to be outside working, and are pushing back against those and making those more difficult so that they fundamentally are not going to be able to do the things that they're already finding are working for them. It has to do with increased regulations along a number of different areas, particularly when it comes to families and having families and things like that. And those are all policy areas where there's a whole lot that free market feminists can do to build a world where we don't have this pay gap, where where people of all genders feel more supported in having families. And, that actually doesn't take more government. It mostly takes less. And so I think that, when we sort of write off this issue as, oh, it's about choice, you just miss so much of that picture. And that's just one example of areas where, if we say that feminism is for the left, it does nothing for shrinking the size and scope of government. It does nothing for individuals. And it also, tends to result in these heavy-handed government central policies that don't actually accomplish what we want to see. Another one there is maternity, paternity, parental leave. There's a big push to have guaranteed, government guaranteed parental leave. And, I'm a big fan of parental leave. I think you should have it. And most people feel the same. And that's why we're seeing companies are increasingly competing when it comes to benefits in terms of having better paternity leave, better maternity leave. But when it's government controlled, we actually see that women in countries where there is a generous maternity leave policy, oftentimes, they don't move as far high up in a leadership structure, for example, because that same kind of mommy tracking mentality is happening, where not only are people now thinking, oh, okay, well, if she's getting married and having children, she's not going to be spending as much time at work. They're now also realizing that, okay, well, I'm also by government required to give this that I'm not required to give to a father. So I'm going to make decisions based upon that, which is why we also see the gender pay gap starting to close after women turn age 60. Why? Well, women who turn 60 aren't going to be having any children. So, I mean, there's things like that. And these are difficult policies to work out. When people have tried to say, I used to say like, okay, well, if we had equal maternity and paternity leave, the same length, maybe that would fix the problem. And it really doesn't, because they've done some small studies on this. And for example, in one, they looked at economists, where men and women parents were given equal paternal or equal parental leave. And when this happens, the women who got the parental leave did better than women who didn't get that guaranteed parental leave. But they did worse than men who were not parents. And everybody did worse than men who did get parental leave. Why? Because the women who were getting it were overwhelmingly using it to physically heal from pregnancy and childbirth, and also for taking care of their children, whereas a significant percentage of the men who were getting that parental leave were using it essentially as some extra time to be able to work on more projects. They published more papers, they attended more conferences, which is, of course, not the purpose of parental leave. And that comes back then to these cultural attitudes that need to change, because they weren't looking at it as, this is my time to help with childcare, to help my wife heal from pregnancy and childbirth, which are hugely physically, they have a huge physical component to them as well. And it is a serious medical event for many women. And so I think those things as well. And that's not something you fix with government. That's something you fix by talking to people, by changing societal attitudes.